a question came up on the forum today, and I thought it would be interesting to try and go ahead and answer it via video. So what is the question that came up? Well, here's the web page on our community forum. Area map cannot be customized with vertical coordinates. And if you look here, there is a screenshot of what's going on. This is actually showing that there's a zoom on this graph, but really you can see the main issue is here, that we have data that should be all on the same y-axis, but it's the area version is showing up on a different axis, and it's not plotting properly the way that it should be. So as soon as I saw this, I pretty much knew what the issue was, because I can also see here that this is using the bars command, and the bars command specifically does not work with a numerical axis. It's always plotting the information based on the row number that the data is in within the data table. But there's a fix for this. So let me first illustrate the problem. So I made up some data myself, and I went ahead and I did actually a couple of different things here. But the first thing that I did was just recreated the actual problem. So let me show you how to do that. I have a data table here with some data. I have depth, and then I have 3 different columns that I want to do as an area graph, and then another one that I'm just going to want to plot next to it. So first of all, this will be using a split graph. So I'll go ahead and actually let me turn on my mouse clicks here. There you go. So this is going to be a split graph. We'll split it 3 times so you can see what's going on. And the first thing that I'll do is the area graph. So one way you might do this is you select all these numerical columns. Often we have the y-axis selected on the left, and pre-select. Not every command allows you to pre-select, but the bars command does. But if I do it like this, actually this does not quite work right. So in case this has happened to you before, this is again related to the fact that the bars command is not expecting a numerical y-axis. So the depth itself actually became one of our bars. We can just delete this. So I can select here, hit the delete key, that gets rid of it. Now it's just using the A, B, and C column. And I can go ahead and now say, what is this? I wanted a Y, not Y stacked, sorry, Y area. So now it's looking closer to what I want here. And the user who was doing this wanted the Y reverse, because this is, again, a depth. So if you look at this, then you might wonder, well, okay, so how do I get this to use the y-axis? And if you're doing some kind of categories here for the bars command, you change, I have a bunch of stuff I put in this file, sorry about that, but you change this to depth. But then notice what happens. Now every x value, sorry, it is y value here, is shown as a tick mark. This is really not a numerical axis. It's really just a label for each row. So this is not quite what we want. And as a result, if I plot this data, this D data here, use a plot command, go ahead and put this on the middle axis. Actually, this will want the, can hold the command key and drag that to reset it. We'll want this to be the row number. So here's our built-in row number object here. We can select that from the menu as our y-axis, and here's the D value. So notice actually this does work, but if I put what I'm sure you're thinking you would need to do, the depth, now we have these 2 sets of data that are not matching each other on the y-axis. So this is kind of the problem, right? You want for example, if I exclude this bars command, now you see the data plotted properly, has the right y-axis. But if I include this bars command, really what the bars command is plotting, if I just say no, again, labels, this is the row number associated with the data. You can see here, this goes up to row 26. and the scale here is going up to 26. So the one way you can fix this is kind of what I did actually from the beginning. Instead of using the depth for your y-axis, actually use the row counter, and now the data is scaling properly because they're both using the row ID or the row number as the y-axis. So how though do I then show the depth as my actual axis? Well, I can do that by using an extra axis command. So add the extra axis command. We're going to put this as a y-axis. We're going to want to flip it, but for now, let's leave it where it is so you can just see what I'm going to do. I'm going to change here both the origin and the unit because, again, the data is starting now at 1. I want 1 to be a 0, so I have to tell it that the origin here is actually 1. That fixes this here for me. So now for my extra axis, it's labeling correctly the 0 point. And the other thing I need to do is scale this. And I can do that by saying, basically, a scaling factor. And for this data, it turns out to be a scaling factor of 5. And that gives me the right units here on the axis. You can see the depth goes from 0 to 5. Now my axis goes from 0 to 5. And I can go ahead and hide now the native y-axis that's being drawn, and we'll flip this one to the left. This looks pretty good. The only thing I would do here now is remove the padding that I have. And let's see, I'm going to do that up in here. The padding for the y-axis, we'll say that is none, and now it's the full extent of the data. So that is one way that you can fix this. There's another way that I wanted to also show you, because there are 2 commands that can do area graphs. The other command is the pivot command. And what I did for that is I took the same data and I made a flattened version of that data. So here you can see the depth, the category, and the value, where it's now everything is in one long column, and the category is what was the row header is now within this column to indicate for each row the data, what it corresponds to. So once I have it in this format, it's very easy to go ahead and actually create a graph like this. I can go ahead and just select my data. I would hit the pivot command. I would say I want this to be a Y area graph. Here's my data. Oh, I would reverse this again like I did before. But look, what do I see? Notice how the y-axis does actually look similar to what I did initially with the bars command, where it's drawing a tick mark for every X value. So there's one trick that you need to know to do with the pivot command, because it by default is also drawing things on a categorical axis. And that's controlled by this check mark right here. If you don't want categories, but you want the actual numerical values, then uncheck that, and now you can see that you have a numerical scale on the y-axis. So this is really what we were looking for here. Again, you can split this, but then you can actually plot the data. If we go back over here to where I have the values for D, and I want to put this in a plot command. So this would, again, now I would have depth is my Y and D is my X. And I put this on my graph here, the second one. So now I am able to use the depth values natively without any kind of scaling factor or overlay of an extra axis to show the values properly. And I guess I would also go in and, again, I can remove the padding so that this fills out nicely. As a result, this graph and this graph are showing you the same thing, but they're just drawn somewhat differently. Now, if you're not familiar with how do I pivot data, or how do I flatten data so that it's pivotable, let me just go ahead and I'll hide everything but the columns that you see here, what I do, because right now this is all auto-generated data, I'm using some just an expression and random number generators to do this. So I'm going to start by just taking these columns. I'll hold down the Option key and drag them. That will make a copy. Now let's hide this group. And I would need these not to be expressions to show you how to flatten the data. So I can just select all my columns, change to number columns. And now to flatten, I would select my 3 columns, go to Data, Flatten Columns. Now you have this long version of the data. So you can do this either way by, again, adding the extra axis command in here to properly show the y-axis, or you can create a pivoted version of the data that you want to make the area graph of, and then use the pivot command to create it. I hope this was helpful. I did consider also showing you how to just use plots and then use different fills, but I really think that either of these ways are the best way to do it. And I will say that I've been using the bars command myself more recently and have run into this issue where I wanted the bars command to really have a numerical axis. So I've been thinking about this, whether we should add a similar checkbox here as is in the pivot command, so that you can have the bars command provide a numerical axis. All right, so that's all for now. I hope that this was helpful. If it is, please let us know. Like the video, subscribe to our channel, and hopefully we'll be doing more videos like this in the future. And now I just have to, oh, here we go, end my broadcast.